for dogs, all of that stuff is their happy place. It's not work to them. They're having fun when they're finding explosives. They're biting people. That's all fun for them. They don't know any different. If you look at their tails, they're wagging. They're having a good time. Now, some dogs you'll see will have a stiff tail, and they know those are the dogs that know they're in a fight.
Billy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on, man. I mean, you're an impressive guy. It's I've heard a lot of great things about you from a lot of people in your community, and really glad to have you here.
I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, but I'll take that as a good thing.
It's a very good thing.
Yeah.
The guy that introduced us has been a great mentor to me, and he's just a fantastic guy. So
one of those guys that will go out of his way to help other people. It's just within that community that he comes from. It's I wouldn't say it's very common, but I see it more from that community than I would your everyday civilians. That as far as like helping others that are in need.
He's a very good dude. He's very level-headed and kind of stoic sometimes. I'm a big fan of his. So.
Yeah, too smart for me.
Yeah. So let's get into it, man. Like, you were the number one dog trainer in the Navy at one point.
For Europe, yep.
For Europe?
Yeah, so I joined the Navy right after September 11th. I was at Eastern Washington University at the time playing football there as a strong safety. At the time, I was in the Marine Corps Reserves, and then September 11th happened. I remember it pretty vividly. I was sitting in my house with my roommates, was supposed to be in class, was sleeping through that class, and I woke up and I saw that. I turned it on just in time, and it's pretty surreal because right when I turned it on is when the second one crashed right into the other building live right there in front of me. So I kind of knew right then I was going to get activated and that we were going to be involved in something pretty heavily for the foreseeable future. So I went to the Marine Corps and tried to switch my MOSs, my military occupation, because originally I was a communicator. 5531 is what it used to be called. I believe they've changed that MOS code now. And they wouldn't allow me to. So then I turned around and went to the Army and was like, hey, I want to go to Ranger School. And they're like, well, that's cool, but you need to come to our infantry school. And I was like, well, I've been through the Marine Corps infantry school, which is twice as long as yours and more in depth, so why would I have to go to yours? And they said, well, that's because that's where the Rangers recruit from. So I did not want to go through infantry school. It was a good experience, but experience I only wanted to have to go through once. And so then I walked out, and the Navy guy was right there, and he was asking me what I wanted to do, and I said, I really want to be involved in something that has dogs. So dogs were a huge part of my life growing up as a child. I grew up in a pretty abusive, physically and mentally abusive home. And a lot of me and my brothers, basically all of us worked full-time jobs since we were probably 13 to provide, basically to help provide for the household because our parents weren't really in the best space to really do that. And I don't fault them for it as an adult. Families go through struggles, but some of those struggles are done in a manner to which I believe my parents didn't try to get us out of that situation. You know what I mean? I think they were content being where they were. They were pretty severe alcoholics. Just physically, mentally abusive household. And not from my mother, but my mother had a very hard time standing up for herself and us because all the guys that she married were all the same fashion, but they were all much bigger than her. So quite a bit of a fear factor for her as well. But joined the Navy right away. He said, well, he can put you in as a military police officer. Can't guarantee you canine school, but that's the only job within any of the branches that you'll be able to handle a working dog. Joined the Navy, and they gave me an extra bonus as a poor college kid because I was prior service in the Marine Corps Reserves, and was shipped off. Left and went to San Antonio for MP school, and then my first duty station in Sicily.
Very cool.
Yep.
So how long were you doing that before Dev Group picked you up?
So not long. So I was in Sicily, and so in the Navy, and I think in most branches of service, I would assume every security department, which houses all your military police, your military working dogs, all your investigators, just like a civilian police department, goes through an annual inspection. So the canine department where I was at the time in Sigonella, Sicily, was the second largest kennel in the Navy. So we had about I would say 16 dogs and probably 15 handlers. So I showed up, in 6 months after I showed up, we went through our annual inspection. It used to be called LEPS, Law Enforcement Physical Security Inspection. So what they do with the canine department is they'll run scenarios, explosive scenarios where your team, which consists of a handler and a dog, have to find certain amounts of explosives, not really in a time frame, but it is somewhat timed to see, hey, which team's more efficient. And then you go through extraction scenarios, like whether a dog's finding a hidden suspect in a building that was unsecured. All these different real life scenarios that you would be faced with as a police officer, right? And at the end of this inspection, they will rate the top handlers within a geographical area. So they have CONUS, then they had European theater, then they had the Asian, Asia over there and all that stuff. So I was rated the number one dog handler team in Europe. So that happened roughly 2002, 2003. And shortly after that, those same inspectors that inspected me approached me and said, hey, there's a specific team of a SEAL team that's looking to recreate a dog program that was disestablished after the Vietnam War, obviously, because those dogs were not allowed to be brought back because of exposure to certain diseases or everything that they had in Vietnam at the time for dogs. So they're like, would you be interested in something like that? And I'm like, sure. I don't know what it is, but yeah, they're like, with your military background, especially in the Marine Corps, you have more combat training than any sailor will probably have, right? Because they don't go through like a combat training course or infantry school or anything like that. So I said, sure. So they're like, or you'll be receiving a call within a week or so. So sure enough, I'm there. I'm just doing my day-to-day jobs. And I get a call from the security officer telling me, hey, Petty Officer Clark, you have a phone call from a Master Chief SEAL in the skiff. And I'm like, okay. So I go up there and I take the call, and it's an old Master Chief SEAL. It's a great man that was credited. He started the K-9 program for the Navy's Tier 1 mission unit. So he talks to me, and he's like, hey, your name was given us by the LEPS inspectors. We really want to bring you in for an interview and then the physical test, the screening to get into a Navy's Tier 1 mission unit. And I was like, do you know? Then they asked, do you know what that is? I'm like, I have no clue. I was fresh into the military. Family is very military heavy, but I still had never heard of Tier 1 mission units. I didn't know what they were. So I said, sure, I'm more than happy to come down and screen. So I went over there to Virginia Beach, screened, did the PT test, which is a standard BUDS, entry PT test, and then did all the psychological, all the thing that goes involved with screening into a Tier 1 mission unit. And then after that, I stayed on board for an additional 2 weeks of just showing them my canine abilities, like my handling abilities. And then at the end of that, I was supposed to return back to Sicily, but they're like, hey, you're going on deployment. So this was 2002. This was not long. Or late 2002, so it was like towards the end, I would say December timeframe, so OEF 1. So I was deployed with Navy's Tier 1 mission unit and OEF 1, and that's really where I got my start into being a dog handler in a combat zone, and then my story goes on from there, 13 more deployments. And
when you got in with them, did they have an official pipeline for the dog stuff at that point, or was it kind of more an apprentice model?
So it was still basically just the starting shell of the K-9 program. Nothing was established
when they were creating the program.
Yeah, so it was myself and I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other handlers were all brought in, and we helped that Master Chief SEAL develop the current program that they have now. Just based off of all of our shared experiences and the knowledge that we currently had. And we had a guy that was the original kennel master, and his job was to basically assist that Master Chief with getting everything set up. And he was phenomenal at it, the very first kennel master we had there. So who later went on to become a warrant officer and retire. He retired in this area over here as well. But super knowledgeable guy, and he knew the answers to every question that the Master Chief SEAL wanted to ask. And between those two and those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us that were deploying on a constant basis and then returning with information and things that we learned, things that didn't work so well, things that did work well within the combat arena. we established a program that's now been up and running for quite a while now, and it's pretty legit.
Were you pulling a lot of civilian expert data at that point when you were creating the program, or like where were you pulling your kind of knowledge base from? Was it just kind of whatever you guys had, or were you pulling a lot of additional resources to create that?
Well,
program?
so originally we hired a civilian trainer from. He used to be an Indianapolis police officer and everything like that, and then he was working for one of the top canine schools within civilian side of the house. He was working for them as a trainer, so we pulled him over, and he was our first full-time trainer, right? So he knew anything and everything about dogs. So he was a good source of information as far as like how actual civilian police, not military police, handle dogs and the mindset of training the animal. So we brought in an expert who had been doing nothing but training dogs, and he was hired right away. And then so between the three department heads, right, you had the Master Chief SEAL, the Kennel Master, and that trainer. Between those three's mind, they kind of established the program and got it up and running. And then AARs and everything that we were seeing and things that we were not seeing overseas, whether it was the type of explosives we were seeing or hidden personnel or things like that, like how are we approaching those? Those lessons were learned throughout, the 20 plus years of combat after that. But unfortunately, a lot of those lessons within any kind of military environment are lessons that are learned in blood. So it's unfortunate, but we did lose a lot of guys in my time frame there, and we lost quite a few dogs as well, unfortunately. But it's the nature of the business you're living in. I mean, you're working in a tier 1 unit. You're going after the nation's highest value targets at almost every night. So you're turning and burning. It keeps you pretty busy.
Were the dogs, and when you were with DevGru, were the dogs, and this is GWAT era, were they primarily being utilized for detection, or like what was the biggest use you're getting out of the dogs?
So the primary source, most handlers in the military, all they ever do is detection, right? That's 99% of your job as a military police officer. The percentages of military police officers who actually have bites, real live bites under their belt is very, very minuscule. It's very, very small. Civilian police have a much higher rate of dog bites than military police. And that's just because of the nature of the business. On a military installation, it's already locked down, so it's kind of hard for bad guys to get in. But in the civilian sector, they're everywhere. So dogs are getting quite a few bites, especially in Indianapolis and in California over there in LA. Those dogs get a lot of bites. But so going over there, our primary mission, we thought originally, okay, we'll do route protection, force protection for the route for the force as we're going into assault a target, looking for detections of IEDs. But that quickly turned into hidden personnel over IEDs, and then IEDs became secondary, but just based off of what we were running into. But yeah, the dog was always used for detection, whether it's human or man, on the initial insert. And then after we got to target, it was man. So, I mean, you had almost every handler, which is most people don't understand, that the majority of the handlers at the Navy's Tier 1 mission unit are military police officers. They're not operators. And those guys are getting a lot of bites compared to any military police officer that you'll ever run into. It doesn't matter what branch of service, really. So yeah, you're going out on a deployment, you could get anywhere between 20 to 25 bites in the early days, right? So hidden personnel in a building after a call out, or barricaded shooters. Now, there's certain SOPs and stuff that we handle with barricaded shooters that I won't talk about, but that's typically where a dog was being used, to find guys in tree lines, to find guys hiding in palm groves in Iraq. So our primary mission for dogs quickly went from detection of explosives to more, I would say 90% man and maybe 10% explosives. But that's generally how it worked.
And as you were saying in our previous conversation, police dogs are trying to debilitate, so they're going for a leg or something, but these are situations where you got to take the target down immediately. So those dogs are completely different training.
Yeah, so in Europe, your sports, your KMPV, and all the other shits and sports that they have, they're training their dogs to bite limbs. Your typical thing you'd see on TV or Hollywood is a dog biting an arm or a leg or something like that, right? But we don't always have that capability in the mission sets that we are handling. You have guys that'll hide in spider holes and deep into vegetation that the dog, it just has to be able to bite whatever is exposed. So we taught our dogs to bite anything and everything on a human being, because that was the immediate threat that needs to be eliminated or restrained at that point, right? So our dogs were taught to bite whatever was exposed. A hand, a head, foot, doesn't matter, as long as the dog can get the person wrapped up so that we can get up there and take a look at the problem and go from there.
Fascinating. And how do you see, like, with you were talking about how some of the collars that they're utilizing to hunt, where it's like you're giving beep commands or whatever, and you've got a mic attached to the dog. You guys were using some of those early on?
So we used to. There was a collar that was used in hunting. It still may be used in bird hunting. It's called the Here Now collar. So we did try that for a while. I don't know if it's still being utilized this day, but basically we carried a little boom mic on us, and the dog had a collar on that allowed vocal vocal sounds to come out of. So we would be able to send the dog out ranging from a distance of 100 to 200 yards out in front of the force, and be able to tell him to lay down or whatever. We used Dutch commands because we didn't want, obviously, the bad guys to know our commands, and typically that's what the dogs are all trained in Europe anyway, the good ones. So we just maintained it because that's what they knew. So but yeah, we could tell the dog to lay down at a distance if a dog was getting too far out in front where it's pretty difficult to keep eyes on him. So I could literally just tell the dog off, and he'd lay down, and he or she would lay down until we got closer, and then I would give him a command to go back to search. So, but it was the same thing even internally. You could send the dog internally and tell him to lay down, and you could take a look at what's going on in that room, and then tell him, okay, go back to hunt. But I don't know if that's being utilized anymore. But again, it's out on the open market. It's nothing that's classified. It's a hearing collar for hunting dogs.
I've seen them. I'm a big bird hunter, so I've seen them utilized on like Vizslas for bird dogs.
Exactly, and that's just what so it's just so the handler can give commands from a distance. So we did utilize that for a while. Even towards the end of my career there, we didn't use it as much. We still had it, but we had learned different techniques and procedures that you could change to give the dog to do the same thing without making any kind of voice commands, whether it was they vibrate on the collar, because most electric collars have a vibrate capability too. So whether you train that dog that if you feel a vibrate, not Edison medicine, then you need to lay down. So it depends on really the handler and the dog as a team. What was their preference? Like, did they want that loud thing on their neck? That's just something else for the bad guy to hold on to if a dog is on a bite, right? So you don't want a lot of things on your dog, even though they wear vests, but you don't want to give the dog a disadvantage when he or she is engaging a bad guy. And by having so much stuff on their neck, whether it's a choke chain, a flat collar, or a leather collar, and then a shock collar, then here an owl collar. That's just more things for those guys to grab on and be able to control the dog's head, right? So those are things you don't want to get overboard with. So,
what are the biggest lessons? So through military training, I'm sure you were in a leadership position, so you're developing a lot of, I guess, young sailors and people in your community. You're talking earlier about some of the similarities between psychological training of dogs, and you can take some of those lessons to people. Like, what are the biggest lessons you've taken in regards to developing people, dogs, in the other parts of your life? Like, what do you think the best skills you learned from that phase of your life are, and how do you apply them in other stuff, I guess?
Well, good question. So what a lot of people don't understand is when you go through military working dog school within the big military, right? Lackland Air Force Base controls the working dog school for all branches of service. Typically, when I went through in 2002-ish time frame, or end of 2001, beginning of 2002, the school itself was 11 weeks. You did 5 weeks in detection, and then 6 weeks of patrol training, learning the techniques of. And when I went through, they were still using Vietnam techniques, right? Sentry dog techniques, because the war had just kicked off and they hadn't had any lessons learned from the current war to adjust training accordingly. So they were still teaching us sentry dog tactics from like Vietnam, like you stake a dog out for like an alarm if somebody's coming close, like typically what Afghans were doing. And they didn't really teach. They taught you the very, very basics of handling. They expect you to actually go out and learn and watch YouTube videos and establish more training techniques on your own. But they don't really teach you very much into handling. The school needs to be redeveloped, in my opinion. But we've come a long way in training animals from, especially after the global war, that we should be implementing more of that into the schoolhouse, and they're not. They're still kind of stuck in their ways. But that's military schools in general. But I would say the biggest lessons I learned is that just like a dog, humans need the same type of encouragement, whether it's sometimes they need positive reinforcement. If you can see a sailor is struggling and having a hard time in their day, then they may need that positive reinforcement. And then sometimes there's a time where they need negative reinforcements, no different than raising a child. As I talk to my wife about that all the time, and she's like, your kids are not a dog. And I'm like, you're right, but the principle behind animal psychology is the same between human psychology. And that's what I was getting at earlier, is that we actually get credits for psychology from going through military working dog school for college, right? So the psychological aspect always really, really, like, that's what pulled me in, trying to understand what a 70 to 85 pound animal is thinking just by reading their body language, reading their ears, reading their tail, reading just the way they're standing, their posture, their breathing, their tongue. There's so many things on that animal that give you an inclination of what the animal is thinking. And so I tried to use those same techniques on humans, right? Body posture, like eye contact, like things like that. Like what is the position of this person? What are they going through in their life? So I think it helped me a lot in my transition into leadership roles. I promoted pretty fast. I picked up Master Chief at my 14-year mark, and then at 15 years I picked up command. But then was diagnosed with a late-stage cancer, so I had to wait a year before I could actually take command, because I had to go through surgery and chemo and all that stuff as well. So, but yeah, I think, and the biggest lesson I would say, or the primary lesson or trait that I would say I took away from operating at a Navy Tier 1 mission unit was integrity, right? So anytime we were doing any type of training, if you made a mistake and you didn't own up to it, you were gone. They would get rid of you immediately.
That's awesome.
So, and that's because they don't have time to waste on people like that when it comes to like integrity, especially in real world operations. If something was to go astray and you're trying to blame someone else for something that you clearly did and everybody knows it, they just don't have time for that kind of person. So integrity was pushed very heavily from my first team leader and the first squadron I was working with over there. And I tried to keep that trait throughout my existence of my life. I tried to be have as much integrity as I possibly can. If I make mistakes, I own up to them, because mistakes are lessons we learn from. It's not a bad thing to make a mistake. So,
It's so interesting to hear you say that. I was just had a conversation with a buddy about this the other day. Do you think that when you get out of, I'd like to say, not you, your friends getting out of those Tier 1 communities where it's high integrity, everyone wants to be there, there's like a higher standard. Do you see them get a little jaded when they get out of, like, man, most people are not like that, right? There's very few institutions where people have that moral foundation, that a foundation of integrity, that value set, work ethic, and they want to be there. Do you see that bums them out when they get out in other environments, or kind of the opposite, that are lifting the other environment up when they get out of that?
yeah, so I would say it's more of the first, right? So, and I struggle with that still. I've been out for 2.5 years, and I'm currently unemployed right now, looking for work because of things like that, right? So operating at a Tier 1 mission unit, they say 0.001% of the world will ever see or experience anything that those operators experience. Very, very, very small percentage of the entire world's population will ever experience that kind of elite team, right? So yeah, I think the hardest part for guys getting out is they think, oh, the civilian sector is, it'll be similar to that, but it's nowhere near. Like in the civilian sector, they will fire you or just get rid of you. Like a lot of times they bring in guys just because they were at a Tier 1 mission unit for the notoriety, right? They bring them in and they pump them up and say all this stuff, and then 6 months later they let them go. And it's more of a, look who we have working for us, to maybe. And sometimes they're using those people to gain contracts from the government, right? Oh, we have this guy from here on there, so we're very knowledgeable in that stuff, so we can win that contract. And I've seen that quite a bit since I've been out. They bring guys in, very senior guys too. You see it a lot of from flag officers as well. They bring them in just so they can say they have this person on their board of directors, or that this person works for them. And then when they no longer need them, they just push them to the side. I don't think they truly appreciate the caliber of people that they're bringing in, and in the long run, what they end up doing to them in the back end is not very positive. So I think a lot of guys get jaded getting out because they're so used to working at that high level, like you said, and working with guys that even if they may not like the guy that they're working with, they still know that that guy's going to cover their six no matter what.
There's a respect, and there's a hard showing up.
Well, there's a brotherhood.
Job.
There's a brotherhood, even if you don't like them. And there's times where I don't like my brothers, right? But they're still my brothers. I love them. And it's the same with those guys. There's times where I may not agree with decisions that were made. But at the end of the day, the decisions were made. There's nothing I can do to change it. And at the end of the day, those guys will always have my back on the ground as well, and I'll have theirs. And that's just a mentality. But it's not that way in the civilian sector. And it's hard wake up call for guys leaving units like that.
I guess continue on that topic. What communities within, I guess, the civilian sector, just non-government sector, where do you see guys drawn towards going towards out of those just elite? It doesn't even have to be like a DevGru or a CAG situation, but other guys in elite institutions like that. Where do you see them like kind of thrive afterwards or bring up the standard? Like what types of industry and stuff?
So a lot of guys I've seen that leave the community where I came from, a lot of them, surprisingly, have gone into finance.
Yeah.
So a lot go into finance, Wall Street, that type of area, and a lot go into owning their own businesses, like
entrepreneurial
stuff.
Yeah,
entrepreneur like Eddie, right? So Eddie and Dom, what they do with their companies are huge, and I think guys get jaded possibly from working for other people and seeing how it's not what they think it is in the civilian sector, and they just say, "Oh, well, I'll just work for myself."
Let's create something that's lives up to the experience that we've had, or
exactly.
At least try
I mean, why not use the tools that they used and the training that they received over 20 years of sustained combat to teach police officers correct CQB since they can't afford the training, or correct hostage negotiations, or correct hostage rescue, or things like that. Like, why not help out the civilian sector in training where they lack dramatically because of funding, right? So I think that's where a lot of guys see that second chapter of their mission of their life is going into helping others so that they can survive and help others survive, especially with the school shootings and things like that. Like, that stuff's very sad and unfortunate, but you shouldn't have officers freezing at the door for an hour and a half.
Absolutely not.
Why kids are in there getting shot and there's screaming going on. Like, I don't know a single guy in my unit that could have ever stood at that door.
If there's ever a day to do your job, that's
it. Yeah, like just hearing the sound of one child scream would be so detrimental to us that we would have even with no gear, we're going in that room regardless. But that's just the nature of the beast, right? You have guys that run to the sounds of gunfire, and you have guys that run away.
So, what advice? It's interesting. We're in this period where a lot of the GWOT guys have gotten out. Right, we're moving towards peer-on-peer conflicts right now. The veteran community's kind of gone through a lot and a bit of an identity crisis. Like, what advice do you have for some of the guys in the veteran community right now that are kind of in this transitional period, like across the board? What are the patterns you're seeing to help those guys, and like what are some words of advice you'd give them?
Well, I would always say reach out to your brothers, right? Always reach out to your brothers. That's the networking. I would tell people, I even tell my son this, I tell my daughter this, that networking is really the key to success. And I'm not saying networking in a way that find people that can help you and use them at your when you need them. That's not what I mean. Other people think that's what networking is, but finding like-minded people, to me, that have the same passion in life, the same drive to do good, right? And then staying in contact with those people as mentors, as advisors. And then, if a time comes where you need their advice or they can help you out, then they're more than likely going to offer that to you without you having to ask, right? So they say the average veteran comes out, and within 3 years, it takes them about 3 years to find a job or something that makes them feel like they're fulfilling something in the second chapter of their life. And I think that's where I struggle the most, is I'm finding a mission set or a job that I feel like I'm actually impacting others and making a good thing, right? So in the government contracting space where I have been maybe misused, I guess, in my experience, it's hard. I don't think that people in that industry are in it for like helping people. I think they're only in it for making money, because the government wastes billions of dollars throwing at these contracts for And to be honest with you, the contracts that the government is pulling in, they're worthless. They don't help the military. Like half the time on active duty, you're looking at contractors like, what are you doing? Well, this is what they hired me to do. And I'm like, well, that's like second rate work. That's not assisting anybody here. You're just wasting time and wasting money. But the government signed off on it because it lined some bureaucrat's pocket, right? And I think that's, what we talked about a little bit earlier is that's kind of what goes on in D.C. Eli Crane, the congressman of Colorado, has been very vocal about it. A former team guy, first term congressman, and I like what he puts out. He's trying to get the truth out there as far as like what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on everywhere as far as like the reasons the government wants to
siphoning off money.
Exactly.
You look at how much wealth has been created in the surrounding counties to D.C., and that's Northern Virginia, that's Maryland, that's a whole surrounding area. Some of the wealthiest counties in America because these guys are siphoning off tons of cash.
And what Americans don't understand is that it's your taxpayers' money.
Yep.
They're just so like, oh, well, that's not my money. No, all of it is your money. All of it is the money you're paying in taxes. It's your Social Security money that you're paying, and the government's just wasting it. And unfortunately, by the time I'm fully retiring at 62, or if whatever they raised the age limit to 70 now, I think they're trying to raise it to. There won't be any Social Security for me, unfortunately.
No, and it's crazy. I spent 2 years there working for DOD and doing research. The disconnect, the resentment towards the average American. It's one of the few capital cities that people from other nations can come, go to our elite schools, get government jobs, get security clearances. They hate America. I mean, I went to American University there. It's one of the most liberal schools in the country. I regret going there greatly. It was very common for guys from the UK, from the Middle East, to come there and talk about how stupid Americans were and how much they hate America, and they'd be embraced by the DC elite. And I think you're familiar with this. This zeitgeist, describing this zeitgeist is not wrong. If you love America, I love American tradition, I love our Constitution, I love our values, you're from the center of the country, which I was, they hate your guts, and they don't want you to get ahead in that system. So it's a weird... It's like our elite in that circle are disconnected from their tax base. It's just a tax farm that don't.
And the sad thing is like we discussed prior to, it's more of a uniparty. It's not a Democrat. It's not a Republican thing. It's a DC thing, right? It's 100%. A bureaucrat thing. Yeah. Like you have your small group of people that are in Congress and the Senate that are trying to do good things, and what happens to them? They get ostracized. They get kicked out of there because they're not playing the game. And if the government really honestly thinks that Americans are that stupid and don't realize what's going on, I get it. By nature, humans are tribal people, and that's what we do with the red and the whole blue, the diversity that they're creating between that. They're doing that purposely for reasons. But I think that Americans are smart enough now and always have been to understand that, hey, this isn't right. Like, you're saying jobs are up, 1.5 million. Really? I don't see any jobs. I see a lot of veterans struggling to find work, like legitimate work. Now, you have the jobs are going up for legal and illegal aliens 100% because you just flooded the entire country with over 2 million plus. Maybe probably more than that.
Which is a power play. They could shut that down anytime. I mean,
he doesn't need Congress or the Senate.
No,
he has executive orders to do it.
Poland did it. Poland secured their border. Well, I was in Poland. I mean, if these countries like Hungary and Poland can secure their borders with aggressive migration waves, the United States government can do it. It's an intentional thing,
Yeah, I mean, he did 60? I think they said 64 executive orders on day one on the border, but he's scared to do a single executive order now because he's trying to say that the Republicans are doing it because they control the House, but it has nothing to do with the House. He can do it on his own. He just chooses not to. So. And again, that's where I was saying more back to the veterans. I know a lot of vets that are struggling to find work, and it's not like what they're saying. They're saying that the jobs are up, the economy is up. The economy is not up. Inflation is up. Gas is still over $4 in most areas. Groceries are up 20-something% or 30%, I think, still. So
housing costs.
Exactly, housing costs. Me and my wife and family bought a home 2 years ago, and it's already up like $80,000 more than what we paid for it. And I'm like, and I live close to the Beltway, right? So, I mean, that's part of it. But at the same time, it's like people can't really afford to buy homes or get groceries. Or if they can, then you have to cut something out, whether it's medical expenses or what, right? So I I don't know how any American can honestly, subconsciously or consciously say that we are in a better place today than we were under the previous president, right?
Chaotic, and it's interesting you describing the. I never really got to experience that in the military. I was, briefly in the Guard and did research and stuff. So there was really not a brotherhood type element at that level at all. It was more of a bureaucracy. It's so cool to hear you say that, but it's like I'd love to see Americans kind of have that mentality where we had each other's backs. There's more patriotism and love of country because there's, like you're saying, there's always going to be in a family people making decisions they don't agree with, but we should have each other's backs. I wish Americans had a little bit more of that.
Yeah, and you see it. You see it a lot with the American families nowadays. They're just, again, like I said, we're so tribal as people that even if the party that we're associated with, or no party, even if you're an independent, you want to believe everything that specific party or your tribe is doing is good, is for the good of the people, right? But at some point, I think you need to take a step back, regardless of what tribe you're associated with, and take a 10,000-foot view of what is really going on here. Why are the same people being elected over and over and over? Like, why are there no term limits? Why are they joining the Congress or the Senate making $180,000 base pay, but then 2 years later, like AOC is worth millions of dollars?
Smoke and mirrors.
You were a waitress at a bar.
Yeah.
And you now are worth multi-millions of dollars because you were in Congress for a few years. Like, how is that possible? That's not your base pay. You don't make that much, not even close to that. It's all insider trading. It's all that stuff that's going on that we talked about. And at the end of the day, red or blue, it doesn't matter. I just don't think they truly care about Americans.
It's become too like a religion for people. Politics has, you have this, we were talking about this on one of the other shows, the spiritual vacuum in America where people have, used to, for better or worse, used to identify their main value set with religion or a spiritual practice, right? And that's kind of gone away. So they're looking for that deeper identity in other ways. And politics is not where you should get that from.
No, yeah.
If you're listening to propagandists and politicians for your core ideology, you're going to be pretty messed up.
Yeah, you're going to be no different than those guys sitting in D.C. just lining their pockets with money. But you brought up a good point as far as religion, right? So I just recently saw an article this morning, and they're talking about how religion is going down so heavily within the young adult community in the United States. And I think that was done intentionally by the government, trying to pull religion out from underneath our feet and make us more reliant on them and looking at them as this savior, when in actuality they're just doing more damage than they are good. And it's getting to the point to, I think, so many Americans are going to get fed up. Who knows what the future is going to look like, right? I mean, it's so up and down right now. I don't think anybody really truly knows what America's going to look like in the next 10 years. And
the Chinese have an old curse. They say, "May you live in interesting times."
Yeah,
to their enemies, right? And we're kind of there right now, unfortunately. But no, the religion thing, it's interesting. It's a topic I've been very interested in for a lot of years. I'd written a book on this topic, but the publishing house wasn't really seeing eye to eye on some of the main thesis, so I pulled it. But it's the biggest increasing religion right now is the nuns. Nothing.
Oh, interesting.
No affiliation. Gap. It's creating a vacuum because people start to, we've generally been a country with Christian values, right? People can like that or not like that, but that's generally been the ethos of the West. And now that that's pulled out, people are looking for that gap, that gap in their psychological and spiritual identity in other places. And, that pattern happens a lot when communism rises or fascism rises and stuff, when people start to dip off from that. There's usually wars when people dip away from the religion, the state, and these weird ideologies start to replace that. So it's kind of scary. It's not all doom and gloom, but it's a little scary.
It is, yeah. It just makes you feel like you don't really know, like you said, what's going to happen in the next 10 years. My wife is a huge spiritual leader in our family. And she tries to get me to be that leader, and I'm moving towards that direction. Am I there yet? I'm not 100% there yet. I'm trying, but my wife is she's a big believer, and she pushes me to get to that level where she's at, and I love that about her. But you're right. They're taking. I think they're slowly taking that away, and they want you to believe and look at them in that aspect, so that all we do is worship them. And it's funny you say the communist thing is because my wife gets her nails done every couple months or once a month or whatever. I take her to go get them done, and we had an older lady who grew up in I think it was Vietnam Vietnam War, and she would talk about communism and what it was and what it was like to live under that. And she even said slowly but surely she's seeing the same thing currently with this administration, the implementations of trying to take guns from everybody, of controlling the media, controlling social media, and everything we see and we hear, it's all dictated by the current administration, right? So, I mean, they have people on all these Twitter and or whatever you want to call it, X, and all these social media people that they're paying to literally put out propaganda on a daily basis, multiple times a day.
We live in an age of super sophisticated propaganda, but it's not just a pamphlet or a controlled educational institution. It's propaganda that spies on you back. And I think what people don't realize is it's not mainly even the government doing this. It's massive corporations.
It is, yeah.
The social media companies are gathering everything you do on your phone. They're watching everything you do and pumping you with data based on your reaction to that. I mean, now with AI, they're going to be able to see how you're reacting to the propaganda, and they want to lead you down a certain path.
Yeah.
They'll start to adjust that accordingly. So I think more people are waking up to that, but you have to be pretty sharp to understand how
but I think
entrenched we are in that stuff now. So it's kind of scary.
I think, like you said, Sean Ryan's doing a good job of it. You're doing a good job now of getting those people out that are actually seeing that and talking about it. A lot of these Joe Rogan, a lot of these big time podcasts are bringing people on that have woken up and are seeing a lot of these traits and these things that are going on behind the scenes, and they just realize what's going on. And I don't think you have to be a former tier 1 guy or a CIA guy to figure it out. I just think you have to have a good head on your shoulders and a good level mindset and understand that those people in DC are not there for you. They act like they are, but they're not there for you at all.
We're in a very interesting time on the positive side of things with exactly what you're saying, this new media kind of revolution. Legacy media is falling apart, right? And independent creators are getting opportunity they've never had before. Elon Musk has been fabulous with that. And there's other guys really fighting the fight to allow free flow of information, free flow of ideas. You're going to see some very interesting stuff happen. I mean, we're 3 parts. So we've got this podcasting company. We're doing a documentary this year, starting a production studio, but working on new media aggregation stuff too. We're still doing the build out for that. But I mean, man, you look at, even what Barstool Sports did, starting as a blog.
Yeah.
And the niche in the market. Yeah. I mean, they're a little irreverent. I think they're funny, but look at Nelk and some of these other guys. It's very interesting to see what a couple kids and some cameras have created long term. I mean, they're creating billion-dollar businesses, and I think you'll see the same thing in political information. You'll see the same thing in education, the DIY stuff. There's so much opportunity to learn amazing things from this technology, exchange ideas, and there's some very positive stuff going on.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's in looking at all the negativity that's going on in America, there is some positive outcome to this. I think people are waking up, and that freedom of speech and all those other things that are, so solely encompassed in our Constitution. People are realizing, oh, you're trying to take these things from me by dictating what I see and what I read on the news and things like that. And I think, like you said, a lot of people are realizing that, and it's blown up. Obviously, the podcast world and the social media world is unbelievable now.
Even education. I mean, it started as like DIY stuff. I mean, the amount of people I know that learned how to completely fix cars. They basically learned what they learned at auto mechanic school through YouTube.
Yeah.
Well, people are starting to figure out kind of organically, which is even better. I really like this guy's videos on auto mechanics. Oh, here's his email. I'll give him a call. We'll set up a Zoom.
Exactly, yeah.
So the grinders have figured out, I like learning from this person. I'm going to figure out how to contact them. But now that's going to start officiating into more, maybe that replaces community colleges and stuff, and someone, online education gets better. I'll interact directly with a professor to learn more from them, or even in the trades and stuff. So I think the opportunity to access anyone in the world, learn from them, communicate with them quickly is it's going to change education quickly too.
Yeah, and I think that for a good thing too. I mean, I use YouTube as well. Like if I can't figure out whatever it is, a plumbing project or fixing a wall project or whatever it may be, I just YouTube it, and you can put in, like you said, down to the smallest detail, year, model, make, whatever. If it's a car, and it's got a video on how to replace a certain part, whether it's a filter or whatever it may be, a tire, brakes, whatever. But yeah, unlimited learning on YouTube.
Even though I don't love this company with some of the deceptive stuff they're doing, the tool is still unbelievable. The GPT-4, I mean, dude, like you could plug in. I've done it for business plans. Plug in everyone you know's resume, their emotional temperament, what they like, what they don't like, what your business kind of wants to do. Boom, write a business plan and assign roles.
Yeah,
3 minutes. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be pretty darn good. Better than 3 weeks of Googling and doing research.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you got AI projects like Chat GPT and all these other things.
That's one.
Yeah, like people are just doing their own things. Like, hey, write me a resume based off of this job description. Boop, pops it out.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what's going on
It's
here?
unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, I have friends in business that'll type in, 1,000 pages of data into the newest model of like what their business plans are, what their numbers have been. How do we adjust our business plan to fix these problems? Boom. Yeah. I mean, it's.
But you know what's scary about that is from my perspective, really though, is where's AI? I mean, where is it? I mean, and maybe it's because I don't understand that much technology as far as AI goes. But where is this information? I mean, is it just doing a worldwide search of the web and creating it, or are people inputting that information? That's what scares me.
It's both. That's the scary thing that I was getting to with the OpenAI is people stop thinking for themselves, and there's a lot of subversive stuff. OpenAI, the ChatGPT people are very, very left-leaning, and Musk made a really interesting point. The reason you've seen that big shift is because Silicon Valley has grown a ton in the last 15 years. It's the most Berkeley, the research areas, Palo Alto are some of the most left-leaning places in the country. So that's who runs Silicon Valley. That's why you've seen this shift, is that's where the industry's gone. And Musk's just a moderate, like free-thinking dude. So he's just like, I just kind of allowed moderate, like free speech. And people are thinking he's a right-wing guy. No, it's just things have shifted really hard in that community. So you got to be careful your masters are. The Chinese have, a huge presence in San Francisco, and Google and some of these companies are like, they don't think of themselves as America. They're like, we're Google, we're bigger than America. You can hear the founders of some of these companies say it directly. We're a little bit bigger than countries. We're a global thing, and they're able to kind of bypass some of the, regulations.
Yeah, I think a good example of that, it is much smaller or micro version of it would be GPS, right? So I remember as a kid, you always had to. Before we had computers, we used atlases to figure out where we were going on a road trip or something like that. And then you had computers came out and you could print them out on. It was like Google. You could say, okay,
MapQuest.
Yeah, MapQuest, right? And now everybody uses their phone. So, but with their phone is not there, they're clueless. Like they don't even know where they're going. They're like, I need to go here, but I don't have my phone and my GPS. Where am I supposed to go? I'm like, you don't know what landmarks are? Like, use certain landmarks and use your memory to remember. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, do something. But that's just a small micro aspect of how dependent people have become on AI or technology and things like that.
They've shut their brain off.
Completely.
Yeah, that's what's scary.
And that's where I was getting at when they're like, oh, I don't even know how to get there. I'm like, well, you go there every day on using your phone. Like, how do you not know how to get there by now? It's because they shut their brain off and they just listen to the phone. They're listening in micro, or they're multitasking in the car and listening to the phone and not paying attention to where they're driving.
It's bad for you. The coolest clubs too. Like, there's a guy we had on that owns this cigar shop. He worked in Hong Kong for a long time. He's kind of a visionary dude. He's like trying to create this classy experience. This cigar bar in Charleston. It's my favorite joint. Give you the brief. He's like, hey, no hats. You got to dress up nice. It's not a monastery, but there's ladies in here, so no cussing. And he's really upped this culture in this cigar bar. It's really cool, but he has no phones.
Interesting.
He will boot you if you're messing around your phone, and it's nice because people aren't distracted. They're engaging with each other.
They're having conversation.
Conversation, and a lot of people clubs and restaurants and stuff are starting to be like, no phones in here. We'll boot you out.
That's good. Yeah,
it's great.
I haven't seen anything like that, but that's a good movement. Like, no, don't turn your phones off before you come in or whatever.
Take videos of stuff. Let's leave the phones at the door.
Let's remember we're humans and we have to interact with humans and not robots all the time.
I think it'd be great in a work environment to have a no phone rule.
Yeah, I mean, you have to in special mission units. Most of
On a
those
skiff
areas
or
are
whatever,
skiffs.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but again, yeah, like I mean,
In a
most of the
corporate
guys.
sector, though, like just so people are actually using their brains and communicating, the younger generations, they're not used to it. They've got anxiety problems because they're not used to communicating directly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a punishment tool. Like I said, in regards to training dogs, if I know that my daughter does something wrong, I take her phone. Her phone is her lifeline. For a 14-year-old girl to be able to not contact her friends and everything, what's the worst thing you can do is take their phone from them, and then they have a complete meltdown. And you're like, look at yourself. Look how dependent you are on a cell phone. Like, that's not good.
Well, look, and the other thing is they got teams of psychologists like making these things more addictive and really hurting these kids emotionally, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what they were saying. They did a big study on social media and said social media has actually caused more damage for teenage kids than it does good in any aspect. Suicide rates and everything are up across the board because of bullying on social media websites and things like that, or predatory, pedophiles out there reaching out to young kids. I mean, that's mainly where they're getting them nowadays. It's just through social media. Yeah, it's a bad space to be in, I think.
Did you see The Social Dilemma?
I haven't, no.
They have a kind of cool documentary on Netflix about all the social media stuff, and it doesn't go as deep as it should go, but it's pretty good. They cover a lot of that stuff, and a lot of these people are. I have a friend who was pretty deep in Silicon Valley, and she's like, a lot of these people that worked at these big social media companies are like having a come to Jesus moment where like, what did I do? Like they made a ton of money, but they feel like they know what they've done to society.
They ruined
they feel terrible.
Society, yeah.
Yeah, you think cigarettes were bad?
Yeah, yeah, and maybe that's where you'll see technology go at some point. Is where like remember cigarettes were in every store and gas station and restaurant when I was a kid growing up. There was no smoking areas. Everybody smoked who wanted to smoke. Planes, yeah. I mean, there were still. I think the last time I flew on a plane with an ashtray in the seat was probably when I was in my teenage years. But yeah, you'd see things like that. And then slowly now, that is a big. No one hardly ever smokes cigarettes anymore. I mean, you see a few people every now and then, but it's nowhere near prevalent as it was when we were kids growing up, right? So maybe you'll see a change like that come in the future with technology. Maybe people will slowly realize that, hey, all this technology has its good stuff, but also has a lot of bad stuff tied to it too. So maybe people will see that and start having those, like you said, stores where they'll say, hey, no phones, no service.
All right, Billy. So we were checking out that article on Hunter 7. There's some stuff on Black Rifle published on you. Could you talk a little bit about?
Yeah, so there was an operation in Kandahar. 2000. It was in December of 2007. I think December 4th, 2007. It was just a normal night for us. We were going out. It was pretty cold in the desert at night, and it was winter, so it was actually really cold. I think it was like -3 degrees. No snow. It was Kandahar, so it's all desert still. We came in on a target, and we landed very close to the target, and we're taking effective fire right off the ramp, right? So as soon as we got off the ramp, we got on our firing line and started moving towards the area of the initial engagement. And the engagement stopped. The guys were on it was two guys on a roof that were shooting at us when we landed. And then my team leader was like, Billy, push the dog up to that building, right? So myself and another operator pushed the dog up into that building using a laser to direct the dog into the room. He goes in, and on our dogs, we normally carry an IR light so we can see their location through our NVGs, right? And again, none of this is classified. It's already been out before. So the dog goes into the room, and the dog's light freezes. So from a handler's perspective, when a light is frozen in a room, that means, one, the dog's dead, possibly, and not moving, or the dog has found something that's explosive, right? So because they're taught to be passive response on anything explosive. So we move up to the door. We start pieing the door, and the dog is laying in this primary room next to two rolled up carpets, right? So we make entry, we clear the building. The guys had gotten away from that structure, but the dog found a bunch of weapons that were rolled up into those blankets. So he found a cache, and my dog's name at the time was Axe. So once we leave that area, our eye in the sky was reporting where the bad guys were moving to. So we were moving all over. It turned into a compound search, into a village search, and throughout the night, Axe and myself were we were given the opportunity to be used quite a bit that night, and we were between acts. It wasn't really me. He found 8 hidden enemy personnel that night that would not have been seen if it wasn't for the dog finding them. So 8 hidden enemy, and then all 8 of those guys were eliminated by operators, assaulters, myself, and obviously with the help of the dog, right? But so after we found the cache, we got told to move to a garden type area where there was a hidden bad guy laying down trying to hide himself from thermal optics using blankets, pillowcases in the cold weather, right? So we move over there. We have no eyes on him. So being a handler, a lot of things come into play. You have to not only be aware of what's going on around you because you're in a gunfight, number one, but you also have to look at wind direction. You have to look at different ideas to put your dog in the best situation to quickly find and apprehend anybody, right? So this guy is hidden in this palm groves, not palm groves, it's a garden section in Afghanistan. A lot of the garden sections have like a bunch of 2-3 foot walls in between each row of whatever they're growing, poppy or whatever, right? So our guys above are sparkling down on a bad guy that's hiding, and generally they're close. They're not always spot on. They're in the same vicinity of where the bad guy may be. So knowing that, I had to utilize, again, all the environmental areas to my best ability to better put Axe in a better situation. Not only to save his life, but to save the guys around his life, to make him find the bad guy faster, right? So what I did is I checked the wind, and I brought the dog downwind once I found the direction of the wind, and then I put him out on a search command, and he was going back and forth on the end of these walls, and finally he picked up a scent, and he took off, and he started biting a guy. The guy was screaming. I recalled him. The guy stood up. He had a gun and a bunch of his stuff on him, so he was eliminated. And then they told us, hey, you got 2 more guys that moved into an initial compound next door. So then we had to move to that area, went to that compound, set up containment, had a small animal door, right? They have small animal doors sometimes on the side of their compound walls when they want to get the sheep out or whatever, goats or whatever they're herding, right? So another operator pulls cuts the chain on the animal door, opens it up. We send Axe in, and we hear a bunch of screaming. So we initially go in. Myself and another operator are first on the door where the dog is in because, again, we can see his light moving. And there's 2 bad guys in there with AKs, and he's bouncing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth on each of them, biting them, keeping them both busy so that basically they can't shoot us. And those 2 guys. The
dog was trained to the point to know how to do that?
So he wasn't trained to do that. He was just doing it on his own, right? So maybe he was in it because for dogs, all of that stuff is their happy place. It's not work to them. They're having fun when they're finding explosives. They're biting people. That's all fun for them. They don't know any different. If you look at their tails, they're wagging. They're having a good time. Now, some dogs you'll see will have a stiff tail, and they know those are the dogs that know they're in a fight, but they get off on the fight. Like, they love it. They're like a tier 1 operator. Yeah. Their tail is stiff. They're ready, and they're going in it no matter what. If they die, they die, right? So Axe is bouncing between these 2 guys. Myself and the other operator eliminate them. We move. And before we move, Axe takes off to another room that's right next door to it. So I grab him before he goes in there because I don't know what's in there yet. So as I pull him back and another guy makes entry in there, that room is full of women and kids. So luckily no women and kids were bit or hurt that night. So we finished that thing. I did a cursory search for explosives, no explosives found. And then they're like, hey, you got guys moving all over the place. This is turning into a shit show, right? It's turning into a village. We're having to search because guys are just moving everywhere. And so the force had gotten split. Half the force took like the eastern, western side of the target zone or the village, and then the other half took, the west or the eastern and west, whatever. And kind of worked our way deconflicted to the middle. But as we were clearing and got called to go help the other half of the element, we were coming up into an open field, and the open field had really no cover. And we were walking pretty exposed, and as we're walking, I'm up point with the dog again and the snipers. I see a guy in white man jammies tucked in behind a tight tree that's very tight to the compound wall, and he's like in between the tree and the compound wall, like peekabooing. Like, we can't see him, but he's wearing white man jammies, so it's pretty easy to see him. Low loom and white man jammies just pops out through MVGs, right? So I inform my team leader there's a guy over there, and he's like, get Axe over there. So I send Axe over there, and Axe gets to the base of the tree. And again, like what most people don't understand is that as a handler, there's so many environmental things that you have to pay attention to. Like you're not just paying attention to the gunfight and the bad guys around, but you're paying attention to temperature. You're paying attention to wind direction. You're paying attention to all these things because all those things come into effect when it has a dog trying to find someone. So with the weather being really, really cold, the odor sits extremely low. So if it's hot, the odor will go up and dissipate fast because it's hot. It just deteriorates the odor, right? So knowing that it's cold, I would use the directional laser and laser the ground so that I know he'd put his nose down. So I did that. He goes to the base of the tree because another thing that people don't understand is that dogs have worse night vision than humans. Their nose just takes over. Their nose is 10 million times more stronger than a human. So their nose just takes over all their sensories and they can find things, even if it's pitch black, but their night vision is not as good as a human's. So he gets to the base of the tree, he finds odor, he looks up and he sees the guy and he bites him. He gets him in the forearm and the guy starts running towards a door that we haven't cleared yet. And the door was open. And by the time the guy got about halfway, that room exploded with AK fire, PK fire, all at the force. So we're all basically dropping, taking cover, 360 security and returning fire. Feel the fire, all that stuff, and returning fire at the compound. So during all the bullets that are flying left and right, up, down, every direction they could possibly imagine, you got air dropping bombs about another, I don't know, 1,000 meters away in a ditch where there's a bunch of guys hiding in a ditch. You got 500-pounders going off. You got bullets going in every direction. But I could see something happened in the engagement. So Axe was biting the guy in the forearm, and I could see it looked like something like a baseball bat maybe hit him, but there was obviously nothing. And then I see him let go of the guy. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, he's hit. He had to have been hit because there's no way a dog's body's going to jerk like that, and there's no way he's going to let go of that bite, right? So that's going on, and then the guy is dropped. When Axe comes off, the guy's dropped, and then I'm recalling Axe as much as I can. I'm calling Axe here, and it's loud. Like the gig's up. Everybody knows we're there, so I'm screaming Axe, 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 because there's so much stuff going on. And this is where the emotional side of the connection between a dog and a handler really come into effect, because you can see the pain that's in this animal, and it's pissing you off. Like, that man hurt my partner, and he is doing everything within his power and his initiative to make his way to me, and I can see he's stumbling pretty good. So one of the recce guys, a good friend of mine, is next to me, and I ask him, hey, can you give me cover fire? I'm going to go get him. And he's like, you're out there? And I'm like, yeah, I have to get him. He's not coming anymore. So they did. I ran out there, picked him up in the middle of this fight, brought him back, and then took him behind a small 3-foot wall and was doing the first initial assessments on him. And I was feeling underneath his vest, feeling for gunshot wounds, because when I saw him hit, it looked like it was his midsection. So I'm looking, and I don't find anything. And then my troop chief's coming over comms. He's like, Billy, I need the dog. I need the dog on this tree line. I got a bunch of movers. And I'm like, trying to tell him, hey, you got to hold on a minute. I know he's hit. I'm trying to find the gunshot wound, blah, blah, blah. So I got my leadership begging for the dog in another area of the battlefield. I think that the dog is hit. I'm searching everything I can. I'm already in the middle of a gunfight as it is. So again, people don't maybe understand what a handler is thinking, right? So an operator, it's cut dry, right? You don't have a dog, so your job is to eliminate the threat as quickly as possible to keep your brothers and everybody else safe around you. But for a handler, you have all of these different things going on as far as, like I said, direction, wind direction, temperature, all this other stuff. Now you have a troop chief in one ear screaming he needs a dog over here, and you have the medic in the other ear checking on the how's the dog doing, Billy? Do you need me at the PJ? Do you need me at your location? So I'm searching. I don't feel anything. Like I said, it's really cold. But then the dog, Axe keeps pulling me. He wants to get back into the fight. I'm like, well, maybe he's not hit. Maybe it was just a reaction to the loud shooting going on that he jerked like that. So he's pulling and pulling and pulling. He wants to get back into the fight bad. But as he's doing that, I close in my nods a little bit so I can see closer to me, and I can see steam coming off of his head. So I remove my glove, and I start feeling the top of his head, and I could feel bone, like bone fragmentation, skin fragmentation, and I look at my hand, and there's blood. So I'm like, now I have to relay, hey, dog's hit, I need PJ at my location. They're like, where's he hit? Where's he hit? I'm like, he hit in the head. And they're like, everybody's like, what? I'm like, he's hit in the head. So all I knew is that the exit wound was on the top of the head. I didn't know where the entry wound at the time was or anything like that. So the sniper that was with me, and me and him went to a small, I would say like kind of like an outhouse or something for them that we had already cleared, so I could get the dog in there in white light and start looking at the actual gunshot wound. So I'm in there. I ripping open my blowout kit, trying to get as much gauze into the wound as much as I can, wrap him as much as I can, but he's fighting. He wants to get outside so bad and fight. And finally the PJ comes in, really good friend of mine, saved our dogs a lot, multiple dogs. And he's like, and I'm telling him, I'm like, hey, he wants to fight. I can't calm him down. So he's like, I got the medicine for that. So he gave him a little bit of morphine. Number one, to control the pain, but number two, it would knock him down some so he's not being so aggressive to get out back into the fight. So he gives him a little bit of morphine. We wrap him up some more to make sure it's good to go, and then we call for a medevac, which can't come in now because it's too hot. The HLZ is too hot. So they're telling us, hey, you're going to have to wait at least another hour. And the flight distance from Kandahar to where we were at in Kandahar was about an hour flight on a 47, right? So we're sitting there waiting for a medevac, but all this stuff's going on around us. We still can't do much. So finally, everything's over. The gunfight's over. We go back, and then the helicopter comes in. We put him on. Our medics start working on him right away on the bird. He's pretty much knocked out at this point. And then as soon as we land, the vet is already waiting on the flight line at the base there in Kandahar. And we go inside, and they're doing a bunch of work on him. But the vet we had, she was a National Guard vet, and she was a horse doctor. So she never had treated anybody or anything with a gunshot wound. So she didn't really have an idea of what she was doing. And I could see it. She was flustered. She was scared. She didn't really know what she was doing. And she had me breathing down her neck, basically saying, you better save him. This isn't good. So once we got on there, we realized that the entry wound was up underneath the left eye. It hit the cheekbone, came up behind the eye and severed the optic nerve, and then bounced out of the skull. So basically his cheekbone saved his life. If it would have went a little higher, it would have went straight into the brain, and it would have killed him underneath the eye, but it bounced off the cheekbone and deflected it up. So it blew out a bunch of fragmental bone in his nose. He had a bunch of breathing issues at the time. I mean, it healed, obviously, from the impact of the bullet. And he lost vision in his left eye. But while we were in there in the vet's office, he started to go deeply into shock. So now he's breathing really fast. And she was like, I can tell you one thing, he's not going to last very long breathing at this capacity. He's breathing too hard. His organs are going to shut down. So I said, okay, well, what do we do? She said, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? You're a vet and you don't know what you're supposed to be doing? She's like, I've never treated a gunshot wound. I was not briefed on this. I'm like, you came into a war zone and you've never treated a gunshot wound on an animal. Yeah. She's like, no, I haven't. I'm sorry. And
was that her MOS?
Yes, she was a veterinarian. But
why would a horse vet?
Yeah, again, she's National Guard, right? Yeah. So then I jump in my vehicle. Like, one of the guys stays behind, keeps an eye on Axe. I go back to the compound. I go get our medics that were working on him on the bird. And I'm like, hey, this vet has no idea what she's doing. She says he's breathing too fast and he's going to die if we don't slow his breathing. So the main doctor starts laughing and gets in the car with me. I'm like, what? He's like, it's a very simple fix. Watch. So he goes in there and he's asking her what's going on. She's giving him the whole down low. And he's like, okay. So he mixes clenbuterol and oxygen for like asthma or whatever. And that would clenbuterol, I believe that's what it was. And he mixes them into one mask and he puts them on. Instantaneously, the dog goes back to breathing normal. And she's just dumbfounded. He's like, it's the same medicine as humans. It's no different. She goes, the same thing I would do for a human, I'm doing for this dog. So they did that, and that's really what saved him, because that vet had no clue what was going on. She was going to let him sit there and die by breathing as fast as he could until his organs failed, because she didn't know what to do. So those docs came in, saved his life, and then within the next 24 hours, they cleaned everything up, removed the bone, a fragmentation, stitched up the exit wound and the entry wound, and within 24 hours, he was out playing and looking for his Kong. but we couldn't use him anymore. So he got brought back. We did some training with him to see how he would still do with no vision in that left eye. And he was fine. Like, he was still loved to bite, loved doing his job, but he had a problem bumping into things on his left-hand side. So we're not going to put this dog at a disadvantage into combat, so we're just going to retire him. And our vet tech ended up retiring him, and he lived his last 7 years living on a couch, chewing on bones and kongs.
Nice,
and then,
nice retirement.
Yeah, he had his PTSD on 4th of July every year. Our vet tech would have to take him in the backyard because he would flip out with the explosions and the fireworks. He would bounce back and forth and sprint all night in the yard because he just thought he was in a combat zone again, right? So he died after 7 years. He had bone cancer and finally passed away. But he lived his last 7 years very comfortable, living on a couch and having a good life. But yeah, so the dog was given a Bronze Star with Valor and a Purple Heart that night. It was pretty good.
That's pretty
good,
cool.
Pretty good night. Yeah. So it was a total of 8 hidden enemy personnel that me and him found, and I think that's a record that still stands.
That's awesome. Great story. So you've been through a lot of stuff, cancer recovery, operating at a pretty high level. What advice do you give into I'm going to say multiple communities here. I'd say the veteran community, people, and how can the veteran community what do they need to do to take care of each other, but also to be kind of inspirations to Americans and patriots in kind of a broken time in our country's history. I feel like that's a big purpose. A lot of people are looking up to them for leadership right now. And the second part of the question is, words of advice to some of these younger guys going in right now.
Yeah, I would say the biggest advice I would give veterans is to always make yourself available to the younger generation. Don't think because you are a tier 1 operator or whatever it may be that you're too good to give information to the younger generation. Don't have that arrogant attitude to where you feel like you can't teach those underneath you the same tactics and techniques that maybe you saved your life or in other guys' lives, right? And you don't see it that much. There is your select few that are very arrogant that think they know everything, but the majority of that population that I served with are very open to helping and training, like what I said, whether it's police officers or anything like that. So always be open to help and give advice to the younger generation and even the current generation of police officers and things like that. But keep yourself open and engaged in the veteran community, because that's the big thing is a lot of veterans, once they get out, they kind of detach themselves from veteran work or anything veteran related or even the military in general. They just completely cut it off and move on with their life. But that's a hard thing to do to yourself psychologically, mentally, and physically, because that's what you've known for 20 plus years, right? So to just cut that out of your life and never deal with it again, you're losing part of your family. So not like family in a sense of your wife and kids, obviously, but like family that you've worked for and a mission that you did for 20 plus years. This is an important part of your life. So I have found that dealing with veterans has actually helped me, because you're speaking with people who are like-minded, who have been in the same type of situations, maybe not exactly, but in some aspect they've been in your situation as a veteran. So I have found some solace and peace in that environment. I didn't think I would be as heavily involved in the veteran community as I am, but I am pretty involved. I'm the vice president of Sheepdog Coalition, which is a special operations nonprofit that helps with VA claims, CRSC claims, and just mental health stuff, like take guys out on hunting and fishing trips to get them out with like-minded soft veterans.
Very cool.
and share that community of brotherhood. And I'm also the national spokesman for 107 Foundation, which is a nonprofit for veterans and active duty service members who have gotten cancer from exposure or burn pit exposure. So those are very big portions of my life that I love doing engagements for and speaking to people about, and just two good nonprofits that are really trying to do the best they can to help the veteran community. So, and the second part of that question was,
well, the young guys that are in right now,
the
guys going into the military right now. Military is going through a very tumultuous time with leadership crisis, and a lot of my favorite dudes I commissioned with got out a while ago, and they're very jaded. So I think it's a tough time. These kids are facing potential pure-on-pure conflicts, not the best leadership, very divided country. I have a lot of respect for the guys that are going in this environment. Like, what advice do you got for those guys? They're fresh out of boot camp, they're just starting their career, and they're kind of in a chaotic time right now?
Yeah, so I would give them the same advice I give my son. My son is a young intel, soon to be a sergeant, but he put in his commission package for an officer, so he'll commission as well as an intel officer in the reserves. And I would give them the same advice I would give my son, like realizing that the military is, no matter where it is in the world, the U.S. military is still the number one teacher of leadership in the world. Like, there's no better place to learn leadership. You're going to have your bad leaders, like every community or every Fortune 500 company may have, but you also have really, really good leaders, right? I believe leadership is a trait that is genetically your predisposition to have it. I think you can strengthen it and teach it to an extent, but I think most people are either born leaders. And those born leaders can help teach that to others. Now, you can improve their leadership, I believe, but I don't think if you're not a born leader, I personally don't think that you can become one of the top leaders in the world. I'm not saying that's impossible. Some people can do whatever they want, but I think that leaders are genetically predispositioned people to be leaders, and you can strengthen that. But like I said, you can teach leadership to an extent, but I think genetically you have to have something in you that makes you want to be a leader, to get out in the forefront and speak on things that are important. But I would tell them to, like I tell my son, right, to suck up as much information as those from your leaders as you can, whether you like it or don't like it. Take the stuff you like, hold on to it. The things you don't like, get rid of it. But no, even as an officer, it's from a former command master chief leading, and my son becoming an officer, I was like, listen to your NCOs. Your NCOs know what they're doing, especially your older ones that have been in combat, know what they're doing. If you don't listen to them as an officer, you will not get any respect from any enlisted man. So, and he understands that very, very good, because you'll get officers that come in, and it's a very small percentage of them. I mean, you could have a degree in Frisbee Toss 101 and become an officer, right? It doesn't make you qualified to lead soldiers, sailors, airmen, or Marines. And my job as a command master chief was to mentor younger officers and give them better leadership traits. And my guys loved it. They'd come sit in my office and say, "Hey, Master Chief, what do you got for me today?" And I'd just give them an example of something, and we would go into deep conversation and take more from it. So yeah, learn as much leadership as you can. Take advantage of the free training you get from the military, especially free schooling. I got my bachelor's and my master's degree in the military without even using my GI Bill. So, tuition assistance, use those programs. Like we say that, when we first come in, where these young guys are like, I'm not going to do all that stuff. But as you get older and you start hitting your 14, 15 year mark, you're like, man, I need to be marketable on the outside. That's coming quick. So I need to do things to make myself better. Whether that's education, whether that's trade schools, or whatever that may be. Take advantage of all those opportunities that are out there from your military. And that's not from a command master chief, because I was one of those young guys that was like, I'm not going back to school anymore. I joined the military to be a lifer. Like, this is my job, to go to war and be a lifer. And then slowly realizing about my 12, 13, 14 year mark that I better finish my degrees. So yeah, finish your degrees, get education, learning, and learning the leadership side of the house, and do the hard things first, right? That's what I told my son and everybody else that asked me, like, Billy, how'd you make Master Chief so fast? Like, isn't that some kind of record, 14 years as a military police officer? And I said, I don't know what the fastest rate is. I got told by quite a few Master Chiefs that I was the first one that they've ever seen make it that fast, and then picked up command at my 15-year mark. But I tell everybody, it's not because of who I am. Has nothing to do with that. It has to do with my work ethic. Like, I came in with a very strong work ethic. My grandfather instilled that in me. Like, you work hard. Your work is a direct reflection of who you are as a person. So when I initially came in, I tried to do all of the hard stuff that comes with a career early on. That way, I knew if I get rid of all of the hard stuff early on, all these deployments, all these times away from my family, that the second chapter wouldn't be so bad as far as the second half of my career. And it worked. I did everything I needed to do. I found good leaders that I looked up to, that I still talk to this day, that are mentors. And I just continue to learn from them on a daily basis as far as being a better husband, better father, and a better leader, right? So I still use those guys. And then that's what got me to, I think, where I needed to be at my 14-year mark when I was up for Master Chief, is that I had done all the hard stuff. There wasn't nothing that board could say, oh, well, he needs to do some more of this. I had already led senior NCOs, or senior enlisted leaders, from E7 and above for many years by then. So I promoted really quickly and picked up command pretty quickly and had a very successful couple tours as a command master chief, one at an F-18 squadron and the last one working for SOCOM. But yeah, that's the advice I would give them is learn as much leadership traits as you can from the leaders you're working with. Take the good, forget the bad, in your own opinion. Number two, do the hard stuff. Do all the hard stuff now while you're young. You're physically capable enough to do it. If you're not married, that's even better. And then, just continue to pass that knowledge down to the younger generation as you move up in your career. But you're right. It's a very rough time recruiting's down across the spectrum. I don't think anybody met their quotas last year as far as the DoD. And it's because leadership has gotten pretty bad at the higher levels in the military, in my opinion. The flag levels, you have some good leaders. I'm not saying they're all bad, but you have a lot of them are now very much turning into politicians, right? So you have guys that get in those spots that are up in D.C. for 3 or 4 years, and they're already planning their exit. As they're planning their exit strategy when they first get stationed there. Like, what politicians can I tie in with to be a part of this?
100%.
Yeah.
And there's more high-ranking generals now than there were during World War II. It's like they're more bureaucrat politicians than they are military leaders.
Yeah, but I think that too is that the military has changed.
It's more sophisticated.
Yeah, it's more sophisticated. You have a lot more technology.
That's fair.
That are in fields that you have to have experts in those fields, so they promote people to admiral or general or whatever. But you're right. I mean, you see these flag officers, they retire and they get a consulting job for $300,000 a year for a company to do what? Nothing. The majority of them aren't doing anything. They're just on the board of directors so they can put their name there. Yeah. I know quite a few of them, so people can say, that's not how it works. Oh, that's how it works. I know exactly how it works. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Just because I'm unlisted doesn't mean I don't see what the flag officers are doing.
Probably see more.
Yeah, we probably see more of the behind the scenes of than what they think, right? So, but yeah, a lot of them get these consulting gigs for paying them a lot of money to do nothing. It's just because they're tied in with that organization or that political party or whatever it may be, and that's what they do. Good on them. I mean, hey, they're getting paid for it, but at the same time, you're not doing nothing. You're taking money away from other people that could be doing something hard for that company and doing a good job for that company. But and again, that's not all of them. There are a lot of good generals and admirals out there, but I have seen quite a few of them take these consulting gigs. They're paying a lot of money to really not do much, but to be on the board of directors. So, yeah, that's the advice I give them: is learn as much as you possibly can, whether you do 8 years, 4 years, 20 years. Take advantage of the education, the free education that they give you, and try to pass that knowledge down to the next generation.
Where can people find out about your work, or if they,
you can go on sheepdogcoalition.com and hunter7foundation.com, and you'll see a lot of my nonprofit stuff there. And then on my LinkedIn profile, you'll see a lot of the stuff that I've done for the veteran community and things like that.
It was great having you here, man. It's a real pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Honor to have you on. This is awesome.
Awesome. Well, thanks. I appreciate it, Sam.
Thanks, man.
All right, brother.